Hello and welcome to Unpreachy, a podcast of homilies and reflections from St. John Chrysostom Parish. Today, Father Brian Zumbrum reflects on John chapter 20, verses 1 to 9, the Gospel reading for Easter Sunday, March 31st, 2024.
So earlier this week, I had the opportunity to catch up with a young man who had recently graduated college. And as we talked over Chick-fil-A, he shared how he felt stuck. But the prospect of saying yes to this new job he had been offered would mean leaving what he had grown accustomed to, and that scared him. And then he goes, "You know, Pastor, if only I knew that it would all work out okay, it would make this decision so much easier." And I felt myself like falling into a time warp, because I immediately started thinking of all of those moments in my own life where I was exactly where he was. Those moments in which I stood on the edge of a chasm and took a leap with no idea how wide or deep the chasm would be, and no guarantee that I would ever reach the other side. And yet I knew in each of those moments I couldn't stay where I was, that I had to make some sort of change. I was on the proverbial ledge and there was no going back. Whether it was the first day I stepped into the college dorm, or the first day of my teaching career, whether it was stepping into the pulpit for a funeral in which my heart was already broken, or stepping in front of a gym full of 1,000 kids to preach, whether it was starting a new grad program or deciding it was time to move, I never knew what was to come, but I knew I had reached the point where I needed to leap. And I'm convinced that it is this feeling that is so powerfully captured in our gospel today. That moment when the disciples are crowded in an empty tomb, a place where they knew they could not stay, and yet the possibilities of the future were so unclear. Is the body simply missing? Is it stolen? Or could something else be at work? The possibility of resurrection that had once been promised but seemed so impossible that it had all been but forgotten. And I imagine, like that young man in a Chick-fil-A, that those disciples too would have wished that someone could have just given them all the answers, assured them that everything was going to be okay. But that doesn't happen, at least not yet, not in this gospel. For all of the appearances of the risen Christ come later, and yet this is the gospel we proclaim on Easter Sunday, the only one without a resurrection. And I'm convinced that there is a reason why we do so. Because the truth is, these Easter moments, these Sunday mornings when we find ourselves in our own proverbial empty tombs, occur again and again throughout our lives. Moments in which we don't have clarity or certainty or guarantees. Moments that require us to have faith in ourselves, in one another, and in this God we encounter anew this day, even if we are still questioning all three of those groups in any given moment. It's moments that change everything, but we have no idea how. It's moments that demand that we leap first and then wait for our feet to one day contact solid ground again. It's the moments when the pregnancy test comes back positive, or we're told we can't have children of our own, or the foster agency calls and says they have a child. It's when we get down on one knee, when we move in together, when we're handed the keys to our first place, when we tell the kids it's time to sell the house and move into the assisted living center. It's when the divorce papers are finalized that morning after. It's when we're told there's a new treatment, when we decide to stop the treatments we're taking. It's when we arrive for our first day of work, when the retirement party draws to a close, when the proverbial pink slip hits our email. It's when we trust a friend with that secret that has weighed in our hearts for decades. It's when we walk into a therapist's office for the first time and admit I'm not okay. It's when we stand on the edge of the gravesite, staring down at the heart we feel we've just buried. My friends, this day, we will once again come forward and say amen, saying yes to each of these moments and the God we encounter in all of them, knowing that as we stand on our own precipice, God gently grabs our hand and leaps with us into the abyss. So let us do so. Let us leave our empty tombs and take our leaps, trusting that resurrection dawn awaits us on the other side. May God be praised.
Unpreachy is a production of St. John Chrysostom Parish in Wallingford, Pennsylvania. Visit us at sjcparish.org. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. This podcast was produced by Brendan Lorden with music by Skytoes on Upbeat. Thanks for listening. Be well.